What is up, everyone? We have got a ton of Bundesliga soccer coming up over the next couple weeks. Beginning on Friday, May 22nd, we're going to have matches on 10 of 12 days. So plenty of Bundesliga soccer to break down in the coming weeks. And right now, I'm going to talk about the Friday match between Hertha Berlin and Union Berlin, a Berlin derby, if you will. We've got a 60K GPP on DraftKings, which is pretty nice for a Friday showdown. All right, Hertha Berlin is the slight favorite in this game. We've got a standard 2.5 total here, with Hertha Berlin implied to score 1.5 goals and Union Berlin implied to score 1 goal. I actually think that these teams should probably be set at a goal and a half each or a goal and a quarter each. I don't think either should be favored here. I think perhaps the reason we see Hertha Berlin favored is because they are the home team and they're coming off a nice 3-0 win over Hoffenheim last weekend. But I don't think home field advantage means a whole lot right now, given that we have no crowds. This is really closer to a neutral field. Union Berlin lost their last match, but that came against the best team in the Bundesliga, Bayern Munich. So I really think this one is closer to a coin flip, so perhaps a little value on Union Berlin in this matchup. And the reason I say this is, if we're looking at these teams, they're basically at the same spot in the table. Only a point separates them, and they have nearly an identical goal differential. To take it a step further, my expected goal projections based on their expected goals and expected goals against for the season put them both at nearly a goal and a half, just under. So no matter how you split it, these teams are very evenly matched. And as I mentioned, it's not really a home game for Hertha Berlin. So with that in mind, I'm going to start by just talking about a couple bets that could make sense here. I do like the over, but at minus 115 odds, I'm probably going to leave that alone. However, I think the draw is interesting here at plus 230, given that I do think these teams are very evenly matched. In addition, if we want to look for a little more upside, a more exciting bet, I think the 2-1 scoreline either way is really interesting here. You can get plus 750 on Hertha Berlin currently and plus 950 on a 2-win Union Berlin victory there. So two or three interesting bets to think about there, as I think the line is just a little bit off here. All right. From a DFS perspective, as I've already mentioned, I've got these teams both at nearly a goal and a half, so neither particularly stands out as having more upside from a scoring perspective here. In terms of, DK scoring outside of goals, I've got their projected shots on goal, crosses, and chances created here, and then the total DK points. Union Berlin actually comes out slightly ahead here, but we're only talking about 3 DK points overall. So again, not a substantial amount. Where does that leave us in terms of DFS strategy and the optimal showdown build? I think it's more about picking out the best players and not worrying too much about which team they come from. I think you could easily end up on a 3-3 build or a 4-2 build in favor of either team, depending on which players you like. So speaking of players, let's take a closer look. I have my projections here for the slate. The guys highlighted in green are the projected starters. DKF is their floor projection, and then DK is their full projection. The floor projection just leaves out goals, assists, and the clean sheet bonus. So it's a bit more reliable projection for a cash build in particular. And then over here, I've got their salary as well as their salary-based value for their floor projection and their full projection. All right, so you're going to see the top projected player is Christopher Trimmel from Union Berlin. He's got the highest floor and overall projection. I think he's probably a guy that should be 100% owned if we're talking about a cash or optimal build. He takes almost all of the set pieces for Union Berlin and just has a very reliable floor, even though he is at the defender position. Speaking of defenders, there's two very high-priced defenders on the Hertha Berlin side as well, and that's Mittelstadt and Plattenhardt. Both of them project very well here also, although their salaries are a bit expensive, and I do like Trimmel better because he is the cheapest of that trio. One thing to look at with Hertha Berlin is where we expect the set pieces are going to come from. Plattenhardt and Mittelstadt have both taken set pieces in the past. However, last match when the two of them were in, Plattenhardt, I believe, took all of the corners, so he seems to have the priority there. But another thing to consider here is that Vladimir Darida, the central midfielder, was suspended for that prior match, and he should be slotted back into the starting lineup here. So at that point, I think it's a question of whether it's going to be Darida or Plattenhardt taking. When they have both been on the field, there's not a real clear answer on who's going to have the majority of the corners here. I would give a slight edge to Plattenhardt based on the history I reviewed, but I think it's very possible that we see some sort of 60-40 or 50-50 split between Darida and Plattenhardt. But let's, I don't want to get too caught up in set pieces. It's not the end all be all. I think regardless of where the set pieces land, Mittelstadt, Darida, and Plattenhardt are all really good floor plays because they are open play crossers as well. Perhaps Darida is the best value here because he is the cheapest of that bunch. All right, so those three guys are all high floor plays that are viable in a cash or an optimal build, as well as tournament lineups. But if we're looking for a little more upside specifically, Cunha from Hertha Berlin is a guy to look at. He is the most expensive player in the slate, but he's very unique. He projects for a 10-point floor, so that puts him right in the category with those defenders I mentioned in terms of floor. But he also probably, even though it doesn't show on the projection, probably has the highest upside of any of those players just based on his goal-scoring ability. Another thing I did, and what I often do to find upside, is I'll look at player per 90 expected goals and expected assists, and then you can combine them to kind of get an upside metric. So if we do that on this slate, Cunha comes out on top in terms of potential upside among players that are expected to start. If Piatek starts, he's really high up there as well, but as of this moment, he's not a projected starter. Additional upside we might be able to find, Sebastian Anderson is another guy I'm looking at. He did not start last match, but he came off the bench, and the projected lineups I'm seeing are indicating that he could slot back into the starting lineup here. He's got good goal-scoring odds relative to the other players on this slate at 38%, and he is the penalty taker of choice when he is on the field for Union Berlin, so that's something that we always like to see in terms of upside for players. And the best part is that he only costs $6,000, and his floor is actually, for that price, not bad at all. So he is another strong play, definitely for his upside in tournaments, but he's actually not out of the question for an optimal or cash build in my mind as well. So the guys we've discussed thus far outside of Anderson are all pretty pricey, and we're not going to be able to fit them all in a lineup. So we are going to need to find some value elsewhere. In terms of value plays, a couple that jump out to me are Marko Grucic, 3,200 for Hertha Berlin. Not great projections, but again, when we're paying down to that level, which is nearly the bottom of the salary list, we're really just looking for someone to get us 4 or 5 points and then open up the salary to spend up elsewhere. So he's one guy I'm looking at. And then I really like Christian Genter from Union Berlin. This is another guy that did not start last weekend, but there have been indications that he came off the bench last week, and there are indications that he could come in and start here. He actually projects really well for his $3,200 price tag at 7.8 DK points. So he's definitely another guy I'm looking at to open up some value here. So that covers it. I want to keep it short and sweet today. But with all the Bundesliga games that are coming up in the next couple weeks, I do plan to put out as many videos as possible previewing those. So if you are interested in playing Bundesliga DFS, make sure to subscribe and follow along. And I will be here almost daily giving my thoughts and insight on each slate. All right, good luck on the Friday Showdown Slate, and I will see you next time.